Welcome back to another video, guys. Hope you're all doing well. In this video I'd like to show you a tutorial for this dragon, not the church, just the dragon, or this dragon statue, including the actual stand. So this isn't going to be a block for block tutorial. I'm going to show you through the various stages, explain the various techniques, why I've used them and why it makes making a dragon a lot easier. So I'll begin with the 2D sketch. So here's a decent model of a dragon that I found online. It's a Warhammer dragon, and it has quite a few features that I like that we can take inspiration from. The overall proportions are quite nice. It's quite serpent-like, which I find to be quite appropriate for a dragon. It's a little bit too skinny. We don't have to copy it totally, but I find that it's quite useful to have a look online at a few examples before designing my own building, or in this case, dragon. So I'm going to begin sketching, again using inspiration from the model here. So if we start with the head, which I would say you should oversize, but we can edit things later if it is undersized. So again, trying to make this serpent-like, and don't overcomplicate the sketch. There's absolutely no reason to overcomplicate it at this stage. Remember, we're going to pixelate it later on. So I've done the body at this stage. You can see I've made it slightly thicker, and beginning to sketch the wings now. So that's quite a simplistic sketch. You can now begin to add more details like the spines of the dragon. So if we add some spines here, some spines onto the back, and now you can alter things like perhaps the head scale. If you feel like the head is a little bit small, remember we need this to be oversized because of the fact that we're going to make this in Minecraft. We need certain areas that require more detail to be larger, so that we have more blocks to work with. Now that we've made the initial sketch, we can now go over it and make a few corrections, make it look a little bit more tidy. Obviously, before you do this, make a new layer. Choose a different colour so you don't mistake the old sketch for the new. So that's the new sketch completed, I believe. So I just removed the old one. Yeah, so you can see the new sketch, that's a lot better. At this stage, like, you can see the lower leg here. The hind leg, you can see that's probably a little bit too big when you compare it to the front arm. So you can still make some small corrections, but it's obviously up to you. Again, don't make the sketch too complicated. We're going to pixelate it, so don't add any sort of shading or even teeth. Definitely don't add teeth. That's way too precise. So I'll now show you how to pixelate the dragon, scale it, and put it into Minecraft. So once you've completed the sketch, you can now decide how big you want the dragon to be. To give you a sense of scale, because this can be a hard process, the dragon in this example is 106 blocks tall from the very bottom of its tail to the very top of its wing. So if we try to resize this, you can see if we resize the height, obviously maintain the aspect ratio. If we give it the same scale, so 106, you can see that it's now pixelated. This is why I told you not to draw the teeth or any major details. So from here we can begin to, I like to show the grid, makes it a little bit more easier. So now we've pixelated the dragon, we can now begin to again refine the sketch using individual pixels. Again, use a different color. and simply draw on all the relevant blocks. So whilst drawing on the final sketch onto this dragon, try to place the black pixels, as you can see me doing here. Try to place them on the darkest blocks to retain the true sketch, the true form of the dragon. And if you feel like you need to make any adjustments at any stage during this process, feel free to do so. And these lines here, these are actually bones in the dragon's wing, so they need to be maybe not perfectly straight, but they should have maybe a gentle curve at the very most. They definitely shouldn't have two curves to it like an S shape like this. They should be either straight or have a very gentle curve like this. So you can see here the arm is very pixelated. It's really not worth going to too much effort to make this more detailed before you pixelate it. So I think that's the final pixel layer completed now. If we remove the original, you can see everything's done. Maybe make some fixes here perhaps, but obviously make sure that it's complete, make sure that everything is clear. You don't want anything to be ambiguous before you start making it. These obviously here, these have to be clearly spines. It's perhaps a good idea to also add in the where the body ends and where the spines start, like I'm doing here. And make sure the tail is nicely tapered into the body, the rest of the body. Again, I like to make these dragons look quite serpent-like, so try to take that into mind. I think a snake-like body is quite easy because it is just a long tapered tube. Make sure the jaw, the overall head is done correctly. That's obviously a very, very important bit of the dragon. So I think that's all fine. I'll now show you how to put it into Minecraft. So to begin with, save the project as a PNG. Once you've completed the pixelated dragon sketch, save it as a PNG file rather than a JPEG, because we want to retain these transparent pixels. That won't be the case if you save it as a JPEG picture. And I use Spritecraft for this process because it's a lot easier than just manually copying it into Minecraft. It is 106 blocks in total, of course. So once you've installed Spritecraft, go into options, make sure you've got side view enabled, and set no max width and no max height. That's very important as well. And create a blueprint. As you can see, it's saved as oak wood, and save the schematic. Once you've completed the 2D sketch and pasted it into Minecraft, you can now begin to add the 3D parts of the dragon. So I'm going to begin around the neck area, and quite similar to how you build a ship, you can begin to add these sort of like ribs, not exactly, but I can actually place that properly. This framework will help you build out the body in the later stages. So you want to repeat these circles all the way down. They're not exactly circular, they're not completely circular. You want to make them more oval shaped, but it's up to you. If you want your dragon to be a beast, then obviously make these wider. If you want it to be slimmer, make these more narrow. It's completely up to you. So let's do one more. Obviously you can do one side and then copy and paste it over, flip it over. But to begin with, I like to manually do it on both sides, just so I have a greater sense of what the shapes look like. If you just do one side, it's harder to tell what the circle actually looks like. Beginning with the head, I actually like to base various bits of this dragon on real life creatures. For the head, I like to use dinosaurs as inspiration. Obviously, some kind of theropod dinosaur like an allosaur or a T-Rex. T-Rex actually had quite a big head, so a T-Rex probably isn't the best example for this. But yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect at the moment, just get the general shape. You'll obviously do a lot of modification later on, so yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, but something like that, and then obviously copy it over. I think that's it. So moving to the second stage, so you can see I've completed these ribs all the way along the dragon's body. I haven't touched the limbs and I haven't touched the wings at this stage. You can see the head there. You can add a tongue if you'd like to, and the eyes as well. So again, base the head off some kind of animal in real life, maybe a crocodile if you'd like to do that. That would be a good choice as well. So at this stage you can begin to plan the limbs in a little bit of detail. So I don't make them three-dimensional at this stage, I just move them outwards to the position I'd like them to be. So obviously the arm doesn't start in the chest of the animal, it starts on where it's attached to the outside, to the shoulder. So just simply move that there, and then you can delete the original, and then you can repeat the process with the hind limb. Now we can begin with the wing. So again with the leg there, with the arm, you can choose where you'd like the wing to go. So again, it should attach to more towards the outside of the animal. And remember with the wings, in this arm there's one joint, so the elbow of the animal is here. So what we want to do is use a different angle. If we just use one line to begin with, actually, let's just use this. So using the plan, copying from the plan here, if we move this wing or this bone out by 2 or 3 blocks every time until we get to this joint here. So you can see, copying the plan still, and then if we change the angle of this line so it's more gradual to indicate that there's a joint, we can now move this up, so like that. Maybe move it one more block outwards, and then add this claw. So you can see there's a distinctive change of angle. Perhaps we want a slightly greater angle, so let's do this. Okay, so I've finished the first arm. You can see there's a distinctive change of angle, so that's the joint is there, and the forearm, I believe, is the more the less angled line. You can now begin on the actual fingers, the elongated fingers for the dragon. So it has, this example has 4 fingers, one that connects to the elbow. I'm not sure if you'd call that a finger technically, but it definitely has 3 fingers there, and then a shortened finger here where the claw is. So you want to repeat the same process on these fingers, obviously. I like to base this design on a bat. You could choose a pterosaur or some other flying creature. So yeah, repeat this process. Remember there's a joint here. I'll move over to this example so that you can see. There's a joint here. This is more optional, but I like to do it so that the animal looks like it's trying to trap the air in its wings to get more proportion. So yeah, once you've finished that, you'll reach a stage where, like I showed you, where the arm is complete and the fingers are all nicely angled. So from here you can begin now, using the 2D sketch again, you can begin now to add the membrane to the elongated fingers. It's hard to get this, it's hard to base this off the plan because it's so far away, but it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you get the general shape. Again, you're likely to make changes later on, so again, it doesn't really matter if you get a few things wrong here. Sometimes I find it easier to start from both sides to minimize the chances of making too many mistakes. Okay, this is quite not very complicated, quite easy to understand, I'm guessing. So yeah, something like that, and then obviously repeat that stage to the rest of the wing, and you'll end up here. So you can see the wings are complete. Again, try and base this on a bat. I think that's probably the closest animal to this design. So from here you can begin now. To fill out this frame. This process does take a while if you don't use World Edit. I just like to do it manually, so I avoid any potential errors that could arise if you use World Edit. But it's up to you, obviously. So fill this section out. I'll start with the head, as this is probably the most important feature of the animal. So again, filling the creature out with some white wool. Make some corrections if you feel that they're necessary. Okay, so that's the head filled. If you would like to now, you can replace the black frame. You can either use a tool like this, or you could just replace the black wool with the white wool using a command, but details like this, it's often easier just to use a technique like that. Moving over to the limbs now, I'll focus on the hind limbs this time. So again, I like to base these features off real life animals. We can't base it off a snake for obvious reasons, and we can't base it on dinosaurs, some kind of dinosaur, because they were theropod dinosaurs were bipedal. So I've based my dragon off something called a Postosuchus, which is closely related to crocodiles and dinosaurs. Most people think it was quadrupedal, which is what this dragon should be if you build it correctly. I've never seen a bipedal dragon. Maybe if you're quite creative you could design one. So filling this out, this is where you do need to add detail. Obviously working off a 2D plan of this leg, and then obviously we should have some kind of kneecap here. And obviously feel free to make any changes. This hind limb might be slightly too big for my liking. So with the toes, what I like to do to give individual toes, to make them more distinct from the rest, I like to raise the central one, just like that, and then there should be a digit on the side of the foot here. Just like that, and then replace this replace the black wool. It's quite hard to explain this process. It's something that you're going to have to figure out mostly on your own. But like I say, base these limbs and the overall body. On real life animals, keep Google Images open, and yeah, keep working on the model. So that's a fairly decent limb. Obviously you do have to attach it to the rest of the body, so with the hip area here, add some extra muscle. Make sure this is nicely modelled. So that's a fairly good limb. You can do the same on the front one. With the wings, you can now begin to add some muscle to the wings. So again, fill this out as you've done with the hind limb there. Just like so. And obviously there should be muscle below the, I suppose you could call it a shoulder joint down here. It's quite a long process. It is probably the most important part of the build, honestly. If you get this wrong, it can be quite difficult to fix it later on. That goes for every stage. Obviously, if the frame is poorly made, you will have to make more corrections at this stage. But I would say this stage is probably the most important. It's where you can make the most corrections, and it's the stage where the shape of the dragon really comes to life, I suppose you could say. So thickening this arm, obviously this arm needs to support the weight of the dragon in the air, and thickening this. So once you've done that, you can also thicken the fingers, the elongated fingers. So starting with this one, and I like to thicken it all the way down to this joint, so that the finger is tapered, which makes sense. So just like that. Once you finish that process, I know it looks quite a lot different to that one, but there's a lot of stuff to do here. Doing the actual body, the main body, is not too difficult. Doing the limbs, doing the wings, and that's it actually. Doing those three features, the limbs, both the limbs here and the wings up here, that's the most difficult bit. That's the bit you need to concentrate on. In regards to the body, again, if you're copying this design, it's quite snake-like, so really you just fill in the frame and then round off these shapes, make sure it looks aesthetically pleasing. If you see a thin section, make sure you build that up so it's more realistic, more balanced. It's important to get this creature well balanced. Obviously it's a flying creature. In this stage, I actually decided to move the wings backwards slightly so that it's closer to the center of mass of this dragon. So here you can begin now to add the actual membrane to the wings. So starting from here, you can add these guidelines again. This is quite an easy stage, so yes, it's definitely not too difficult. Again, you want to curve this slightly. Make it look like the wind is having an effect on this membrane. So just like that, very, very simple. It's like doing a sail on a ship. If you've made a ship in Minecraft before. Very similar process. Okay, so similar to the body, which I didn't really show actually. You need to smooth these lines that you can see, these layers. Rather than being jagged like this line, You want to smooth it so it's a gentle curve. Again, you want these to be curved, not too curved, but not too straight, to indicate that, again, wind is having an effect on this membrane. And repeat that process all the way up to the top, just like so. Make some small corrections. Okay, so that's one section done. Once you've completed all of the sections, you'll see that your dragon should look something like this. The upper section is a little bit more tricky because of the angle, but I still think it's quite easy to do. Now that you're at this section, you can begin to add the colour scheme to the dragon. So if I use world edit now, got my positions. So I've replaced the dragon with some red nether brick. It's quite a good block to use because, as you can see, it comes in slab, stair and wall variants. You don't want to use a block that doesn't have these blocks available. So now you can begin to add the, if I choose another block, let's use, I think this is mushroom. You want to use a block that's quite light that you can see. So not the final colour scheme like you can see there, which is spruce wood. So that you can see this this block. It's very distinctive. It helps create this colour scheme. It just makes everything clear to begin with. So you can see the bottom third of the dragon should be a different colour. Obviously this is completely up to you though. If you want to colour your dragon another way, feel free to do that, but this is just my personal preference. So continue that all the way down to the tip of the tail. With the limbs, to make the limbs look more distinctive, you want to colour the back third of the limbs in this colour, just like this. And the same with the hind limb. Again, this is inspired by real animals. I think obviously crocodiles have, and like things like salamanders, they have different coloured. They have this kind of colour scheme on their bodies. You can leave the wings out. The wings should be the same colour as the upper part of the body. From here, you can now begin to. If I just quickly grab some netherrack as well. So this is another good block because it has stair, wall and slab variants. You can now begin to add some details to the actual head. Like I say, it's the most important part of the dragon. So beginning with the eye, which is probably the most important of the head. If I get some lightly coloured blocks. There we go. And then wall block here. I actually prefer to use a different colour for the eye. It's strange because I don't actually know what this is called. But yeah, you can make the eye using that strategy. So a stair on either side, and then a full block, and then a slab on top. And obviously a wall block down there. After you've done the eye, I like to work on the top of the dragon, which is this ridge of the dragon, which is quite important. So you can see we've got a horn here. There should be a horn right there. If I just fill this in. So for the head, you definitely want to be using slab and stairs. You don't want to be using full blocks. And try to keep the original plan as much as possible. But feel free to make any modifications, obviously, if you feel that's necessary. You will have to make quite a few at this stage. So just carving out the head here. You can see that looks a lot smoother. And move this bit So this bit should be reserved for the gums. Don't need to go into too much detail at the moment. I actually like to make this area hollow. I think it adds a nice level of detail. It adds some depth to the build. So now work on the lower jaw, or the upper jaw, I should say. Okay, something like that. Maybe modify this actually. Okay, there we go. So it's completely up to you. Like I say, I like to base the head off some kind of dinosaur. An allosaur I've based mine off, so yeah, don't go into too much detail at the moment. It's better to do the head gradually, do some of the rest of the body, and then move back to the head. The spikes are quite easy to do, so obviously you should have them planned already. I like to do just a few spikes. On my previous dragon, I made these spines or spikes all the way down the back, but it takes a long time to do, and I quite like how it looks having 3 spikes here, 5 spikes there, 2 spikes in this example there. It's a lot easier to do, and I think it looks better for whatever reason. You can now add, this is why I like blocks with these wall and slab bearings. You can now use these walls to make a more gradual curve. Very useful. And the same for this spike. Make any modifications, obviously, if you feel that's necessary. Maybe pull this down a little bit. And then something like this. Okay. And then you can thicken these spikes up, again using the walls. Okay. So that might take some time to refine, but you can see the basic shape is there. You can obviously colour the wings how you feel necessary as well. I've left that out for this. Now you can start on the actual limbs. Now this isn't as hard as it looks, honestly. But beginning with the front limb. Okay, so starting with the front limb, I like to use nether brick stairs for these limbs. And again, using that technique of making one digit further out, so the middle finger should be slightly further out to make it more distinct. Just like that, and then the outer one should be maybe like that. We get some slabs here. These are probably better off as slabs. It will take some time to refine this process, but yeah, it's not too difficult. It's harder than it looks, I think. You don't need to add too many stairs and slabs to the rest of the limb, rest of the hand. That's looking okay. Maybe a little bit more refinement here or there, just like that. And it's quite a similar process on the bottom one. Again, adding the toe. So if you use half slabs for the outer claws, and then a longer, a full block for the middle claw. Then let's move this up. That should be pointing inwards like that. And obviously repeat that process on the other side, or just use world edit. You want to save time. So once you've done all that, you can see the limbs are done, the spines are done, and I've forgotten to include the tongue for that. You can also add, let me just show you here. You can also add a crest. Like I said, I based the head off a allosaur, and an allosaur has this. It has an eye here, obviously, and then it has this. It's quite a nice looking crest just in front of its eye. I think it's quite an aesthetically pleasing animal, so it's a good one to take inspiration from. So yeah, something like that. Let's bring this down actually. Okay, something like that, and then obviously you can add a tongue, which is self-explanatory. But now if we get some brick. Get some brick again. It has. I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that it's now got a wall variant. Very useful for this. So we can add the gums. If you look at a dinosaur. Well, we don't actually know what a dinosaur looks like in much detail. But if you look at a crocodile at least, or some other animal, you can see that it's got the upper jaw and the lower jaw, and between these two in the corner it has this region of, I wouldn't say gum actually, I'd say some kind of membrane again. But you can add that in, and then for the teeth, if you get some end stone stair sound walls, you can begin adding the teeth quite randomly. I actually add the teeth in the actual center, even though that's not, obviously animals don't have that in real life. It does make it look a little bit better. If you were to only add it on one side like this, you can see gaps are forming, so it's just smart to do that. Maybe it's a little bit longer, maybe like that. So you can add the teeth like that, and you can add some teeth down here as well. So that's how I like to do the teeth. If I now grab some netherrack again, nether brick, can now begin to add the horns to the side of the head. So I like to do two. Again, this is down to personal preference, and I like to make them straight. It makes it easier to refine them if they're straight. A curve is a little bit harder to refine. So start like that, get the basic shape done, and then with some slabs and some stairs, refine the shape. This might take a little while, but it's really not too difficult. Check the horn from multiple sides to make sure that it's correct. Okay, so that's alright for the bottom one, and then for the top one, again checking it from the top. Use some stairs if you feel that's necessary as well. Okay, that's looking a little bit thin actually. Let's thicken this up. Okay, something like that. Obviously I need more time to refine that, but you get the point. You can also start to add some asymmetry to the dragon at this stage. If we begin with the tail, what I like to do with the tail, using world edits, I like to select the lower part of the tail and move it 2 blocks, maybe 2 or 3 blocks over. So 1, 2. Let's go for 2 blocks actually. Okay. Let's pull that back a little bit more. There we go. So 1 block in that case, but then you can now begin to drag this over. I'll grab some more red nether bricks. So basically you want to make it look like the tail is curving outwards. It's not necessary, obviously, if a dragon was in this stance, it may not sort of curl its tail out in this way. But I think it adds a good bit of detail. I don't think it's nice to see that an animal is completely symmetrical. I don't think that's very realistic. So I think this improves it in quite a significant way, and the amount of effort it takes to improve it in this way is quite low. So you will have to modify some of the body to sort of blend the curvature of the tail in, make some corrections. So you can refine that, obviously. I think you get the point. In terms of the limbs, I'll focus on this limb. You can make these asymmetrical as well. So if we copy this limb, and then we look at it from this angle, then if we move it, let's say 2 blocks to the left and 1 block up, just like that. So you don't have to remake the whole limb, and then just move this arm so that it attaches to the hand now that it's in this new position. Again, this is quite optional. It doesn't make too much difference to the overall look of the dragon, but I think for the amount of effort it takes, it's well worth doing. So you can see there the arm is now in a slightly different position. I might need to make some modifications, some corrections, but you can see now it's a slightly different position, which I would say is more realistic. You can do the same with the hind limb. It's basically the same process. Oh, and you can now begin, this is quite a fun stage, you can now begin to add some tears to the wings if you'd like to. Obviously if you want your dragon to look perfect, you don't need to do this. But I like my dragon to look kind of battle worn, I suppose you could say. So I like to do these do this kind of technique where there are 2 holes quite close together like that, next to each other, and then you can add these kind of tears on the outside. I wouldn't make too many tears to the inside because that's where the membrane is thickest. And focusing on the colour scheme, the membrane should look slightly thinner towards the end of the membrane. So you can see I've used this colour scheme here. So if to highlight this, if I use some orange wool, this is quite a nice effect as well. So the first triangle should taper outwards towards the end, just like so. And then the second one should be within the original triangle and should taper outwards again. So you have that. It's quite a nice design. I like to use a brown colour scheme, so kind of like a bat's wing for these wings, and that just makes it doesn't just add more detail, but it makes it look more realistic because the membrane here should be thinner than the membrane here. Obviously repeat that on the other side, and you'll reach a stage like this. So you have quite a few holes on either side. It's asymmetric, obviously, and you have the colour scheme all the way up and down the wing. You can now, if you'd like to, the dragon is pretty much finished. You can now begin to add, if I grab, I like to use this. First of all, begin where the mouth is, build some blocks outwards like this, and then you can just do a 1 by 1 line. So going down by 1 block every time. Okay, so just like that. And then if you start off with the smaller blocks at the beginning and then enlarge the blocks. Okay, slowly taper this out, and then finally ending here. So once you've completed the wall stage, you can now begin to replace some of the blocks with air blocks so that it doesn't look so thick. So replacing 35:14 with let's say 66%, 35. So 66% of the blocks will remain intact, and then 34% air, and then slowly tapering this. So set a new position, repeat the command, set a new position further along, and again. Okay, there we go. So that's how you taper it out. You can now to this position again, and I've got a command up here somewhere. There we go, and then replace it with some magma blocks, some stained glass. I like to replace some of the lower blocks with some magma blocks, and some of the upper blocks with more glass. And then you can manually sort of add in some higher bits or lower bits. So if you do that kind of randomly, you get the points. Once you've done that, obviously put it in the right position, put it into the dragon's mouth. As you can see, you can modify the tongue so it avoids the fire, obviously. If you want to make a dragon statue, I know a lot of people want to make a statue rather than a living dragon. Replace all of the blocks with stone. I like to use just the regular stone, as in ID1. You will have to use andesite walls. This does take a while because for whatever reason Mojang has decided not to use the original ID system, which is quite annoying, but you can add it onto a natural stand. I prefer a natural stand, and I'll quickly show you how to do this. Okay, so making the stand, make it away from the dragon because you want to paste the dragon onto the stand rather than the other way around. So basically you want to make a mound. This is one of these things that is quite easy, but it takes a long time to refine, so I may not make it look as easy as it actually is. Okay, so you can make this quite random. What I like to do, I like to make a sort of arch in the rock. Let's make this smaller now. I think that's quite a nice feature. Make some kind of base. So this is very easy. And then let's have a little tool. Let's have an extended section here. Okay, so removing blocks with the same tool, but with the material set to 0. Just like that. So that looks quite nice. Again, have a look online. Maybe look at some mountains that look particularly nice. Base it on that. And then you can use, let's pick up another tool. So once you've reached this stage, you can use this command, brush smooth 1 1 1 semicolon or double colon 5, which is the material, the filter material. So if you only want to affect this ID, this block, simply put that in, and then you can begin smoothing this section. If you want to make it more dramatic, you can use this, just increase that value. Some of this you might need to do manually. You can see there some of the sphere is still present. And you can see some of the spheres down here as well. What does this do? It's funny, I'm not very familiar with these kind of commands, but yeah, you get the point. Make it look natural. And that's not looking too bad. It does take some time to refine this, but that really doesn't look too bad. You might want to, this is what I did anyway. If there are any blocks that are standing out like this, just manually do it. And I'm actually using andesite for this. You could use another material, but make sure that it's not the same material as the dragon. If you paste the dragon onto this material and then you want to get it off, it's very difficult without having to redo some of the dragon. So something like that. And then using another tool, let's use a sword for this. Okay, so once you've done that, again I've had to look up the command. You can type this command in using a different item. I'm using a sword. So brush paint sphere 3, so that's the radius. This is the density, so 100% density, so 100% of the blocks will be affected. Set grass block. So basically this just paints the top of the material in whatever block you choose to use. Just like that. So this is a natural statue, or a natural stand I should say. I kind of prefer this. It's easier and I think it's a little bit more enjoyable to make, at least personally. If you want to make some kind of column, that would probably look quite nice as well. So yeah, paint some grass onto it. That doesn't look too good. Obviously I should have taken more time to refine it, but for the purposes of this video, it's hopefully that's adequate. So you can now begin to add some grass. Obviously we'll edit out the flowers that you don't want, etc. And you'll reach a stage like this. So you can see I've got rid of all of the flowers. I've refined the shape of the mound. If there are any blocks sticking or floating, I should say, without any solid stone support, make sure they're supported. Make sure it looks natural. Yeah, I really like the design of this. I'm not sure how realistic this would be. I'm guessing if you made this statue in real life, either the dragon would tip over because of the front heavy design, or the wings simply wouldn't be able to support themselves. But it looks very nice. It's quite a nice fancy statue. Alternatively, if you don't like the statue look, if you want the real look, make a church. Obviously that's very easy to make, and put the dragon on top with fire coming out. That's quite a nice design. You can see for this church, this was actually designed to hold the dragon on top. You can see how the feet are attached. The claws are just kind of digging into the top of this dome, and the front limbs here, or the arms there, sort of gripping onto the upper bit there. And then a nice little touch is break some of the blocks off, so it looks like the dragon has pushed this cross off the top of the church. So 2 options for you if you are following this tutorial. I think either design is quite nice. So I'm going to end the video with some tips. I'm going to end the tutorial with some tips. So this is the old dragon that I made. Obviously you can see, hopefully you can see it's vastly inferior to the recent dragon, and I'd like to just talk about why that is and where I went wrong, because it may help you design your own dragon. So firstly, the head it doesn't include the brick that the newer model includes. So there's no membrane here, which doesn't look very good. The teeth are also inferior. You want to make sure you're using in-block walls. That's very important. The dragon is also badly balanced. You can see the tail is way too thin, and it just looks front heavy. The limbs are also inferior. There's too much. The angles are too complex. You really don't need to add this much detail to the limbs. If I just take this night vision potion again, you can see them in more detail. They're actually different. I didn't use the copying and pasting technique I did, which is completely unnecessary and actually makes it look worse. So make the limbs look simple, just like that. It really doesn't make them look any better to make them look more sort of angular. Also the wings, you can see I didn't taper the fingers on this dragon, which makes it look like the fingers are way too thin. So if you've made this mistake, just go back and taper the fingers. Again, the main thing that's wrong with this dragon is the colour scheme. Back then I had to use those blocks because red nether bricks weren't available in slab and stair variants. Now that they are, I would highly recommend this colour scheme. I think this is probably the best colour scheme you can go for. Also the eye on this dragon is quite inferior, and the overall design is quite lacking. You can see the spines there throughout the dragon. I think it's probably not the best idea. Again, I would definitely favour this design where you have isolated groups of spines. So yeah, I hope that gives you some idea of how you can improve if you've made the dragon and it doesn't look quite as good as it should be. One last thing I should say is in regards to the jaw, make sure this lower jaw is straight. There's no reason to curve it like this. Put a lot of attention into the upper jaw, as I've done here. You can see I've used a lot of stair and slabs here to make this look detailed. You really don't need to add any detail down in this lower jaw. So that's it for this tutorial, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. It's been a very long one. I also hope you'd like the dragon that I've made here. Obviously, making this tutorial involved also making a new dragon, which is quite time consuming. I said before this video I wasn't going to make a new build, but in order to actually make this video, which many people requested, I felt like I had to make a new dragon, and now that I've done that I'm actually quite glad because it is quite a nice dragon. If you think I've missed out anything in this tutorial, I'm going to leave the world download link in the description in case you want to look at any of these construction stages firsthand. So again, I hope this tutorial has been adequate, and once again, thank you for watching.